Hello and welcome to this program on Golfe TV Africa. Today we are receiving for you a special guest, Dr. Peter Baofu. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Dr. Peter Baofu is an American visionary and author of 137 new theories of fictions in 171 books as of June 2021 to provide a visionary challenge to conventional wisdom in all fields of knowledge, that is, the social sciences, the formal sciences, the natural sciences, and the humanity, with the aim for unified theories of all the fields of knowledge and also numerous visions of future history in relation to the mind, nature, society, and culture. For instance, two theories of his concern post-capitalism and post-democracy, about why capitalism and democracy will not survive and will be replaced by what he calls post-capitalism and post-democracy in future civilization. By the way, Professor, we've heard about the African Union's request to have a better representation in the UN Security Council. What do you, by the way, think about that?
Well, that's a very timely question, but it's also a very important one. African Union and Africa is not alone to request a reform of the United Nations. In fact, there are many other countries on earth which have been proposing to change the rules of the United Nations, because right now the United Nations is dominated by 5 permanent members in the Security Council: the U.S., China, Russia, France, and the UK. The Charter was set up in 1945. It was then at the end of the Second World War, and the major victorious power are these 5 major victorial powers. So they set up the game of the rule, and that is to dominate the world according to their own power. But now the world that we live in is very different. For example, the Soviet Union is gone.
Yes.
It's no more. Russia is to replace the Soviet Union, but Russia is a declining power. It's no longer the superpower.
Yeah.
The UK and France are no longer the empires that it was at that time. It was the fall of the French Empire and the British Empire. And those are medium powers now. They are not at the top of the games. That's why the UK, for example, is always sides with the US, no matter what the US does. When the US leaves Afghanistan, the UK will follow. The UK cannot do anything by itself without the support of the US. There's something about France. France is just a small power nowadays by comparison with the superpowers. So the world that we live in is changing. But then China now is no longer the nationalist government in Taiwan. It's now the People's Republic of China. And China is also the rising power to return to its former greatness that they want to have. So it's very different now. So what happened to the rest of the world? The structure is still there. It's still dominated by these powers, but many of them are no longer the dominant powers in charge. So the only 2 of them left are the US and China. They are still very important. But Russia, UK, and France should not even be given a veto power anymore. But that is the legacy of the United Nations in 1945. Not 2021. So yes, a lot of countries, including India, Japan, for example, and the EU now, they're even asking maybe the EU should be represented in the United Nations with a different format. So a lot of people have been asking that, and African Union is no exception to that. Even in Asia, you have some other countries, they are also not very happy about that. In the Middle East, there are some Arabic countries, they are also asking to see if they can have some more representation in the United Nations because of that. So what you are asking is something that people have been asking for more than 30, 40 years already, but things have been changing very slowly. Why? Because the old guards refused to yield power. That is the problem here. In fact, in one of my books that's called The Rise of Authoritarian Liberal Democracy, and I argued in that book that liberal democracy in the West is quite authoritarian. They do not accept difference and equality with other countries. They still want to dominate the world, and in that sense they are very authoritarian. Contrary to what you might think that democracy is democratic, in many ways liberal democracy is very authoritarian. That's why major powers in the West, in this example, often invade other countries, bomb other countries, regime change other countries. Have you ever seen anyone in Africa going to change the regime in London, in Rome, in Washington, D.C.? It's just the reverse. And every time when you see a major power come and bomb the other country, does Africa go and bomb London or Italy or UK? No, it's the UK, the French, and all that. They bomb. Look, Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, Mali, Chad, and all that. You can name it. Afghanistan is the most recent example. Now they get out.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you are asking is not new. People have been talking about that for more than 40 years or more already.
Yeah, but now, you know, the recourse has been made again, and the African Union is putting pressure. What are the chances of the African Union to get this request, you know, done?
Well, if you ask me if you want a diplomatic answer, I can say, well, let's see what's going to happen. Maybe we can get something out of that. But if you want me to give an honest answer, and I think the answer is no. It's power.
It's power.
Major powers in history never just give you the power for free.
For free. You have to earn it.
You have to earn it. And they never just give you the power because you want it. They want to dominate, to bully. It's life. Look at the Roman Empire. They never gave up their domination until they were overthrown. It's true for the Russian Empire, the French Empire, the German Empire, the American Empire, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Empire for that matter. No empire is going to give something for you for free. You have to fight. That fight depends on how much power you have. And Africa right now, sorry to say, you do not have the power to keep them out. You just do not have it. You can talk about it. You can yell, scream, shout, and talk about it. But you think that you are the first person to talk like this? India, by the way, is another good example. In Japan, have been arguing for more than 30, 40 years and say we need to be more represented in the United Nations. But Japan in the 1980s was the rising economic power, and people at the time thought that Japan was going to be the emerging superpower, but it did not happen. But at the time, Japan was economically rising, and Japan said the same thing. Well, we want Japan to be more represented in the United Nations, more power, especially in the Security Council. India too has been very frustrated about this, and India said we want to be more represented in the United Nations. The Middle East, Asia, they talk about. So it's my honest answer. I know we have a lot of wishes, but sometimes you have to be. So my answer to you in the short term, no. You can talk and shout and get angry and punch at the table, but at the end of the day, we will not give that to you for free. You have to fight for it, but you lack that power. It's power.
Well, do you think this is fair if we know that the African continent is a continent where, you know, many of these superpowers get resources, they get a lot of advantages, and Africa is, you know, kind of where they get all their resources, the resources that are contributing to the development, you know. Do you think it is fair for Africa to be treated this way by these Western powers if they have so much advantage on the continent?
Well, this is a question people have been asking, not just in Africa, but also in many other continents. To understand the international order that we have now, you have to understand European colonial era, European colonialism starting, let's say, in the modern times. Starting, let's say, with the Portuguese Empire, the Spanish Empire, they colonized, let's say, especially in Latin America. And then you have the French Empire, the British Empire, and some other European empires. They were doing the same. The Russian Empire too, the Dutch, the British, the American. So you have to understand the history. It's not that it happened last night. This has been going on for the last few hundred years. And slavery in Africa is a good example. Enslavement, the slave trade, for example. But on the other side, I also I spoke about this in my publication, and one of the book is called Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order, in which I predicted that China and India will become the dominant superpowers by the end of the century. In fact, China is already doing that now, and the U.S. and the EU will become less and less dominant. So things are changing, but again, it's a question of power. Look, you talk about this, I think that's a very good question to ask. China and the U.S. right now are also competing in Africa.
We'll address that, but first, speaking of power, don't you think that Africa has what it takes to be a superpower of the world? Don't you think that?
Look, Africa, as I said in previous interviews, Africa is very rich.
Yes.
Africa is not poor at all.
At all.
I mean, in terms of resources, Africa has some of the most natural resources endowment in the entire world.
Yes.
Not even China and the U.S. can compare. They cannot even compare with the resources, the natural resources, and that's why the Europeans were not stupid. They colonized you because they knew that you had a lot of things to give them. And you also have tremendous cheap labor. That's why they enslave you, because it's cheap for them to enslave you. They bought you as a slave, and then you work for them for free. They only feed you and put you in a plantation plant, whatever that might be. It's a question of power again. So resources, you are not poor at all. You are one of the most, the richest continents.
Do you think
the problem is that is the cost for that. The problem is that even though you are very rich in terms of resources, you have not been able to exploit the resources for your own gain. In fact, in Africa is a good example. Even before the rise of the Europeans, even before the Europeans came, Africa was already very poor at that time, and also not very advanced, even at that time. So that is one of the most central questions that Africans have to ask and have to resolve. How are you going to take all the resources that you have and try to develop and empower yourself? And that requires a lot of national strategies. Unfortunately, they do not exist yet.
And Professor, don't you think that unity of Africa can do something about it?
Yes, I do think that unity is, of course, very important. But again, there's also wishful thinking too, in a certain way, because it's nice to talk about unity. Look at the EU. The EU, is there unity at the EU? Well, there's also, that's important, but Africa has a long history of ethnic conflicts. In fact, one of the major problems for slavery in Africa, the Europeans' enslavement of Africans several hundred years ago, was because of the infighting among different tribes in Africa. And they enslaved each other. And the prisoner of war in many of those wars and stripes and all that, they were taken as slaves. And later, and they sold the slave to each other. And then when the European comes, then all of a sudden they want to make something out of it, and they sold the slave to the Europeans instead of selling the slave to the local, the opposite tribes, wherever they might be.
And upon leaving, the Europeans, the colonizers, I want to call them, they left some more division, they left language barrier, they left artificial frontiers and everywhere, and that complicated the whole thing.
Well, yes and no. Look at Singapore. You know Singapore in Southeast Asia.
Yes.
The British colonized Singapore, by the way. Now, Singapore right now has a higher income per capita than the British. They are even richer than the British. Think about it. Now look at Hong Kong. You know Hong Kong?
Yes, Hong Kong.
Now, the British also colonized Hong Kong. But right now Hong Kong has a higher income per capita than the British. They are even richer than the British. They do it. So instead of blaming sometimes, you don't see the other side. I think that it's more important for Africans to stop blaming and look into yourself and see what you can do. Learn, let's say, from the Singaporeans. By the way, many people in Singapore are Chinese. The people in Hong Kong are also Chinese. So the Chinese has a different history. They learn from it. They say, okay, we made some mistakes. Something happened. The Europeans came to colonize us, but we can learn from it and we can be better than they are, and they did. Now, Hong Kong and Singapore are two of the most important financial centers in the world. And of course, London and New York are also very important too. They are probably even more important. But the point is, they make it. They transform themselves. Instead of spending all day and talking about blaming on the other side, but you're not learning from your own problem. So it's time. The same problem in America too, by the way, is the same problem about slavery in America. And it's the same problem.
Professor, you were talking earlier about China and the United States, and by the way, both superpowers have a rivalry on the African continent. What do you think that rivalry is all about?
Well, it's the same question as the previous question, but in a different way. The U.S. does not want to give up power. The U.S. wants to continue to dominate as the dominant superpower, and that's why under Biden and also under Trump, they talk in a very aggressive way. They do not want to cooperate with China that much. Why? Because they consider China as a threat to their own domination. Just as the UK considered Germany as a threat in the 1930s. Why? Because Germany at that time did not want to back down. Germany was at that time was also very angry with all the conditions in Europe at that time. They rose up. So it is the same problem over here, that there would be a rivalry between the two. That's very natural because the U.S. does not want to give up. Western powers, just like in your previous question, or any power, doesn't want to give up power. They also want to be in control and dominate. So if you have a new guy, the new guy has to compete with this one. So now the rivalry is in Africa. Resources is certainly one of the most important. They want now, but remember, the old era is over. Right now, China come here is not becoming to enslave you like the European colonialists.
A win-win,
buy and sell. In fact,
win-win relationship.
Yes, and they build roads, bridges, stadiums, hospitals, school, and all that, sometimes for free. And the Europeans did not do that as a colonizer. So in this relationship, you buy and sell. You give them the resources, they pay you. The problem is, what happened to all those money that you take from them? How come you cannot take all those money that you earn and develop? Well, there are a lot of answers for that. Look at Nigeria is a good example. Nigeria is one of the most important oil producers, but because of corruption at all walks of life, and because of civil conflicts, because of incompetent government system, and there are many other problems. So now all those money disappear in all this kind of pockets. But the money is not that much used for the local people. And Nigeria is one of the highest population in the world, by the way. So you see that. So it's not because they colonize you, but because you do not use the money that you earn. Look at Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or Bahrain. The same question is that they produce a lot of oil, they have a lot of resources, but Dubai, for example, is able to use the money and develop themselves to be one of the major centers in the Middle East, Dubai, for example. But how about Bahrain or Kuwait, for example? Well, you can ask the same question in Africa. What happened to all those money that you take from them in selling all these resources? And then at the end of the day, you want to blame them for the fact that next time you go to the supermarket, you buy something, you pay them, you get something back, right? Yeah, you get something back. And they earn something from you too, right? But then they use the money to reinvest, to make the supermarket larger, to be more successful. How come you cannot behave like that?
It is true that corruption is a problem in Africa, but sometimes these Western powers, these Asian powers, when they come and negotiate our resources, they pay them very cheap. They're cheap, very cheap, and then transform, and now the products that come out of these resources are sold to the continent and at a higher cost.
Yes.
And that cannot be of an advantage to the continent.
By the way, it's not just true here. Even in the U.S., you have a big company. They come to a local village. They negotiate with the local people. They try to open up a big supermarket, a big company. The multinational corporations. Now, the local guys also do not have much negotiation power. So you do not want it, okay, we go to the other town. But if you need the jobs, if you need the investment, so when you are a small guy, you negotiate with the big guy. The big guy often have the power over you. It's like when I fight with you, if you are a big guy, the chance that you win, I lose. It's like, I'm not saying that it's good thing or bad thing. I'm just trying to answer your question. Why does that happen? Why is that a tendency? Yeah, again, it's power.
Yeah, and I have to say that, you know, the African youth in general have come to understand that our problem in Africa is not just the Western world, but we have the problem of leadership. And we have been working on it. We have been putting pressure on our leaders, especially concerning the CFA francs, you know, issue and that. And we hope that this will put a change on the continent. And I've come across something. Then now that you are here, Professor, I want to ask your opinion about it. Do you think the African demography will grow? People think some people are raising the theory of overpopulation in Africa. Do you think that is real?
This kind of question is also a very interesting question. Look at Nigeria is a good example.
Yeah.
I spoke about Nigeria before. Right now, Nigeria has the biggest population in Africa. Nigeria is not the only one. You go to Egypt, you go to Ethiopia, you go to Tanzania, you go to Congo, you go to Angola. They also have a huge population too.
Yes.
But according to some prediction, Nigeria will probably have the third largest population on Earth by the end of the century. In fact, the population of Nigeria may even surpass the population of China. Think about it. China right now has the largest population, but the population is declining. Well, the Chinese government, they are quite aware of this problem. Now they are trying to do something. I don't know yet how successful the new policy will be to help China to fix the problem of declining population. They are working on it. But
I think recently they allowed people to have up to 3 children.
Yeah, but my prediction is that it's just a question of time. They are going to abandon all this population control altogether. And it's even more important, not only that, they will encourage people to have more population by supporting them, give them financial support, taxation, and they are working on that. But I don't know how successful this will be. But assuming that they are not very successful, the Chinese population will decline tremendously. Some predictions even say that the population may decline by half by the end of the century. Now that is very dangerous, but I think they're working on it. The Nigerian, on the other hand, is not doing anything on it. So according to the prediction again, Africa will become, by the end of the century, it depends on the prediction, the population in Africa will be very comparable to the population in the entire Asia. And not only in Nigeria, some of the other countries that I just mentioned, they have higher population. Now, is that bad or good that you ask? Well, bad and good. It depends on how you fix that. One of the beauties of having a big population is the demographic dividend, which means that you have more resources, cheap labor, that you can use that to empower yourself. It's exactly China has been doing. China become the manufacturing center of the world because they take advantage of the cheap labor. In America, we often make a joke. Can you beat the China price? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because in China, they have cheap labor. The wages are very low. In America, the wages are very high. The minimum wages now is about $50 to $70 per hour. There's a lot of money per hour. In China, they don't even pay you 10% of that. But as they become more and more developed, the wages are going to rise too. So now the question is, can Africa and Nigeria, in this case, take advantage of the demographic dividend? Well, my prediction is that sooner or later this is going to happen, but not as much as you want. Why? Because Africa has a larger problem. Look, security problem, corruption problem, tribal problem, government incompetence and all that. All of this, plus many others. A lot of firms in other companies are very reluctant to invest into Africa because of this kind of problem. They cannot make sure that they can make some profit, and you have the sufficient security law and infrastructure and all that to allow them to continue to invest. Ethiopia is making some progress on that. And that's why Nigeria is a good example. Look at all this money that Nigeria is making with all these resources. In fact, forget about population. Talk about the natural resource investment. If Nigeria were to use all this money, oil money that they have sold to China and other countries, and all this money to support and develop themselves in an efficient way, not in a corrupt way, Nigeria could be very rich right now in terms of income per capita. Nigeria could be very high in the ranking. Unfortunately, all this money, so much of it, disappeared into where? You know what I'm talking about. They're also true in many other African countries. It's not because they are poor. Each year, Africa receives a lot of money from buyers of the resources, not because other power, China and America, do not give them anything. They buy and sell. But what happened to all those money? And foreign aid too, by the way. Now, what happened to all those foreign aids? What happened? You see that? Now, that is the golden moment if you are able to fix that problem. So, population is a tremendous problem here in the longer term. But my prediction is that sooner or later, Africa will also undergo some kind of population control too, because this is just exploding. Look, I don't even need to talk about Nigeria. Even in Benin, you go to the street, you see some families. You see a lot of children here.
Definitely.
Everywhere on the street. Now you go to America, you don't see too many children right
on
there.
the road.
No, they are very quiet. You come to visit a household, they have children too, but they are not so noisy because there are not too many children here. Wow, you go to an African household, the children are very, because there are so many of them. They are playing outside too.
Well, thank you, Professor, for all these ideas. We are coming to the end of this interview. Thank you, dear viewers, for having us. This is the end of this show. We'll see you later. Thank you for watching.